Welcome back, Chris Craig. Glad to have you again. Today's topic is going to be leadership, is what we both keep coming up with online, how we think leadership structure for everybody's success is very important. So let's start there and then see where it goes.
Yeah, thank you for having me back again, Kevin. I'm very excited to be here talking with you again. We've actually conversated quite a lot since our first time sitting down and talking together, and you'll hear me say it on my post quite often that our industry craves good leadership. A lot of people complain about where our industry is, what's going on, technician shortage, everything, all of the above. It's my opinion and belief that leadership caused every issue in this industry, and leadership will have to fix it. So it's a very important topic.
I would agree with that. And greed from leadership, not all, but most, within the dealer world, from what I understand, is it's a real problem because the cards are stacked. If you don't produce, you don't make a paycheck. So that's kind of what we're going on. We want to talk about starting there.
Yeah, in a dealership world, yes, there can be some greed there. I'll start with that really stems from what I call ego, right? Leaders tend to get this swagger and ego about them once they get that position. So when you become a manager, so I'll give you my perspective when I was a service advisor, and this wasn't every manager I worked with, but it was quite a lot of them. There tended to be this culture where once you got into that management position, it was time to go into your office, check out from the customers. You don't have to deal with those anymore, and just kick your feet up and watch the whole thing work, right? And now I'm just earning a paycheck watching people work. And that's kind of the energy that my managers had. And because of that, when other advisors became managers, they took that same energy. So they'd walk into their office, they'd kick up their shoes, they would close the door. They wouldn't support anybody. They wouldn't train anybody. They wouldn't lead anything. They wouldn't solve problems. They would just let the place run. And that can work if you're a great leader and you've instilled these values and all these consistent procedures and things, but they're usually not there. And so what that leader does is says, I have all this power and authority. I run the show now. Everyone has to listen to me, but I'm not going to listen to the team. And the team's saying, hey, we got way too many appointments coming in because the call center is setting all these appointments for these same day diagnosis concerns and the transmissions. We only have two techs. It's overloading us. It's never going to work. And the leadership or the management would just say, well, you got to keep your customers happy and just keep in contact with them. They'd shut the door. And they just didn't want to delegate their ability to solve that issue to the advisors. And what I mean by that is give the advisor the authority to call the BDC. BDC stands for Business Development Center. They took all the calls for the dealership and set the appointments. Give the advisor the authority to call them and say, or contact them via email and say, listen, you're overloading us with transmission concerns this week. We can't sustain this. You need to shut that off and not schedule another appointment until next week or the following. The manager should step in and do that, but if he's not going to, he's got to delegate that down to the team, and that's how you actually empower people. And that really comes from an egotistical place because they want to hold on to that power, that authority. I'm in charge. I'm the guy. I'm the man. I run the show. If you let the team start making calls like that, they start to feel like they're losing that power and authority. But really, what they're doing is empowering the team. They don't see it that way. They become insecure and they think that somebody's going to take their job because what's the point of having me if everybody can do everything that I can do? So it's a big, big puzzle to solve. Greed can definitely play into it, but I think it really stems from a base level, foundationally speaking, from a place of egotism.
It's funny you talk about the call center because I have a close friend that works at a dealership, my brother also. He said to me that the call centers are doing this. They decided to put everything to a call center because they thought that the dealerships themselves were turning away work. So they're figuring, well, if we overbook them, they just have to work harder and turn more numbers. And I found that very interesting, but it's kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah,
If they put somebody on the other end.
I can give you a really good example of that. I've worked in four dealerships, Kevin, and I've seen it in every single dealership where service advisors will say, I'm overwhelmed, I can't handle any more work, or I don't want to handle any more work. And what they'll do is they'll go into the system and they'll set what's called a dummy appointment. So they'll make a random appointment for a random vehicle and a random named customer just to block off that hour so that nobody can schedule that. So, for example, maybe we only allow our system to schedule 8 appointments an hour. They'll go in for the next 3 hours and schedule eight appointments for each hour, meaning no one else can schedule them, but they're not real appointments. And they would do that to give themselves a break. So sometimes they're overwhelmed with those calls, et cetera, and they'll bring in a call center that notices those things and they'll correct it that way to where they can start scheduling maximum appointments. But the problem is there's no communication with the advisors who are truly backed up because maybe we have two technicians off on vacation, one called out sick this week or something like that happened. Capacity is going to change on a week to week basis, so that communication has to be there. So call centers are really good, but sometimes they're really bad. And also advisors will step on their own feet sometimes by trying to take control of everything themselves, because that affects the entire shop, right? I'm one advisor. I'm trying to block off an hour because I feel overwhelmed, but what if the other three advisors are starving for work right now, plus technicians? So there has to be some degree of like oversight and that sort of thing as well.
I would agree with that. I was a technician, then I was a service advisor slash manager and stuff like that. And I don't understand. Okay, I guess I'll start here. I don't understand the mindsets in the dealership world. The way these guys act is completely different from the independent world. Let me give you an example. Over and over again on my posts, they're like, we get screwed on flat rate. The technicians, I'm not going to write a beautiful story. So I'm doing the service advisor's job. If he wants, to write the beautiful story, he should do it. Your AI is dumb, this and that. And I'm like thinking to myself, I just can't think that way, because what I think is, if I'm a technician and I write a really good story and I build value into what I find, I can get more time out of it if it's a customer pay, right? And it's going to be a lot easier. And maybe I'm setting the service advisor up for success. Well, why would you set the service advisor up for success? And this is where my head hurts. Like, because if he sells your job quickly and efficiently and gets your parts, you could do the job. You make more money as a technician. So yes, on the back end, you're going to write up a story. But if you're using AI, it takes you a fraction of the time. The story is going to be longer. It's going to be better. The customer is going to understand it, and chances are you're going to sell the work. Now, on the warranty side, I'd imagine if you've been a technician for 30 years, you kind of know how to write that story so the warranty flies.
Mm-hmm.
So why wouldn't you want to do that so your warranties don't get kicked back? That's where I have a hard time understanding why the technicians don't have a problem, or have a problem writing for the service advisors for success. Like, I talked to my brother, who's a service advisor, top one at his dealership. I go, do you have problems with your guys not getting along? He's like, no, I sell their shit. He's like, and sometimes I correct them. He said, hey, you didn't get enough time for this. Let's go ahead and call the insurance company, tell them we're going to punch the clock and do this and keep track of it. He says, so I make sure these guys make a good living so we don't have a problem. I go, well, what about the other service advisors? Well, quite frankly, sometimes they're lazy. So this technician's like, I don't want this guy to succeed, so I won't write a good story. So the other service advisors do not have a lot of experience, are having a hard time selling a job because the technician won't write nothing up that makes sense. So he kind of sets them up to failure. But on the back end, aren't you setting yourself up as a technician to fail too, spiting that?
Yeah, it's such a big relationship. I've been a technician, I've been a service advisor, so I've played both sides of the field here, and I can tell you the stronger relationship I had with my technicians, the more money I made as a service advisor. And like getting into numbers, I've had five-figure months as a service advisor, and that's really because of the partnership that I developed with my technicians. You bring up extended warranties. Well, I've had multiple occasions where a technician's like, "Hey, I want 4 hours for this job." I looked up the labor time, I looked at the car, I want 4 hours for this job. It would go extended warranty, and they'd be thinking they're going to lose their butts on the job. I'd come back and say, "Hey, you got 5 hours on this job," and they'd be like, "Well, how'd you get me 5 hours? I only want four." I said, "Well, I know how to talk to the extended warranty companies. Just do a pre and post repair test drive, and most companies will give you an extra hour." So I knew these little tricks and stuff like that to get my technicians paid. Did they need the additional hour? No. Was it ripping anyone off? Not really, because it's an extended warranty company. You know what I mean? It's like an insurance company, and they're willing to pay it because they want us to do that pre and post repair drive. As long as my technician actually does it, to me, that's morally and legally and ethically okay. So getting my technicians that extra time to do what they need to do to the vehicle, it supports them. But they also knew that they had to support me, because in order for me to get maximum time from an extended warranty, continuing with that example, I needed information. I needed more than, hey, the PCM's bad or the water pump's bad. I needed a cause of failure. Why is it bad? What happened? What else might be wrong with it? Are there any other consequential damages to the system? Because if there are, typically I can get those covered as well. So if a technician gives me maximum information, I can give them maximum results. But it all starts with that communication with both the technician and the advisor. And unfortunately, we have this culture in the dealership where it's us versus them, meaning technician versus advisor versus technician. And I don't understand that, because as an advisor, I can sell work all day, but if I have no one to turn the wrenches, I don't make any money. And as a technician, you can turn wrenches all day, but if you don't have anybody to talk to the customers and sell your work, you're not going to make any money. So why are we not seeing this partnership as what it is, like the most important partnership in all of fixed operations and all of automotive service? We have to drop the egos. We have to drop those and understand that each position does have value. Each position is difficult. It's just a different type of difficult. And if we can swap our resources and truly work as a team, both the technician and the advisor can experience exponential growth in their career, their paycheck, and what they feel valuable in the industry.
I would agree with that. And maybe get with your service advisor as a tech and go, okay, here at the dealership, how can I make more money? How can we sell more? A lot of times, I'm pretty much sure it's still in the labor guides. You get a half hour for a test drive. You can look it up. Okay, burnishing brakes, all this kind of stuff. If you look through these procedures on these repairs, there's a lot of stuff left on the table. It's almost like there needs to be technician training on how to write up jobs. That's one thing we don't hear ever on the boards. Okay, technician training, independent world or whatever, dealership, how to write up a job, how to write up a proper estimate.
Yeah.
You know, we have we charge an hour for each concern at my shops, and when we run out of that hour, if we don't have a diagnosis, we'll call the customer and say, "Here's where we're at. Here's what we did, and we can't duplicate the problem." Well, it does it when. Do you mind coming up here and taking a ride with the service advisor and the technician? We'll just charge you a half an hour. We'll take a half-hour ride. You show us exactly what you're talking about. We never get turned down on that. Versus just going, hey, how frustrating was it for you to be a service advisor back in the day when the guy would come in and go, yeah, I don't even know what they're talking about. I drove it. I looked at it. I don't know what they're talking about. Can't duplicate concern and walk away. And you as a service advisor have to call the guy and go, hey, for charging all this money, we really couldn't reduplicate the problem. Sorry. Or here's another thing. I'll just segue right into it. What about when these guys misdiagnose something? You don't see any of the technicians on the board going, the service advisor's getting yelled at, screamed because I misdiagnosed something.
Yeah.
You've had that where you're getting screamed at.
Oh, I've had both sides of that, 100%. And the cannot duplicate concerns is something that's incredibly common. I don't know how common it is. It's probably very common in the independent world, but in the dealer world, man, when you get a customer that just bought a very expensive vehicle and they've got 5,000 miles on it, they come back and they're complaining about every little tiny creak, crank, bang noise, whatever it is. And sometimes it's valid and sometimes it's not, but it takes a lot of time to verify some of these concerns because they're so obscure. Certain models are worse than others for sure. I could go deeper, but as far as not being able to duplicate the problem, I've actually had it to where I have personally duplicated the concern in the parking lot, parking the vehicle, and then I'll have my technician say I couldn't duplicate the concern. Then I would ask them, well, what did you do to duplicate the concern? Well, I went out and started it and I pulled it in, pulled it back out. I was like, well, did you read the repair order? Because I actually wrote on there that you had to be going X amount of speed, turning full lock left, etc. And they sometimes just wouldn't take that step or do that thing. So they have to chase those concerns properly. They have to give a good effort to it. But all honestly speaking, maybe they did. Maybe they did exactly what the repair order said, took the exact steps, couldn't duplicate the concern. And they go back up to the advisor and like, oh, I couldn't duplicate it, and they walk away. Or they come up and they say, hey, I was diagnosing this for an hour, I duplicated the concern, but I don't know what's wrong, and I walk away. I need more time. Well, in order to sell more time, I need to tell my customer what that first hour bought them. What have we done so far? Did we duplicate the concern? Yes, no. If yes, okay, what did we do? Well, we tested this. We ruled out this component. It's probably not this. This is currently what we're chasing down right here. Unfortunately, we reached our hour. So to continue this diagnostic process from here, we would have to ask you for another hour of diagnostic time or another 2 hours, another half hour, whatever it's going to be, if you'd like us to do that. But to give my customer that story first and foremost, that my technician has tested X, Y, and Z and verified that at least X, Y, and Z is not bad. Now we got to look at A, B, and C, but that's going to require some more time. And you want to set these expectations when you actually first sell that hour of diagnostics. So when the customer's checking in, you say, hey, Mr. Customer, we're going to take that first hour, we're going to diagnose this concern. It doesn't happen all the time, but sometimes we reach the end of that hour and we actually don't have a diagnostic complete because sometimes these problems can be really complex and convoluted. At that time, if that does occur, I'll be calling you. I'll give you an update of what we tested and what we've ruled out, but I'll be asking you for more additional time if that does occur. Is that okay with you? And then that customer would agree to that. Expectations already set. So it's going to be a very easy conversation when you get there. That's really the key to being a service advisor, is setting that expectation. But to continue on that example of technicians misdiagnosing vehicles, my goodness, has that happened a lot. You know what would happen? I worked in a dealership one time and I had one technician that got real comfortable with diagnosing from the computer, and he would just come up to me and tell me what's wrong with the vehicle. Now, mind you, he didn't know what color the car was yet because he hasn't physically seen it. He looked at the concern, he looked up what was common, and he made a recommendation without even touching the car. Didn't even pull into the shop. And what this technician would unfortunately do is I would sell the work, and then he would go in, he would replace that component, he would come back and say, well, that component's replaced, but this is what's wrong with it. And there's no way I would have known that I needed to replace this next part if I didn't replace this first part. Me being a prior technician, sometimes that happens, but most of the time it's BS. And I know it's BS because I know how these cars work and I know those systems are separate. So what he would do is he would misdiagnose the vehicle because he wouldn't look at it. He would replace what component he thinks it probably is based on like recent history or, common things that we replace in these vehicles. And then once he realized he was wrong, he'd get paid on that, which bothered me. And then he would actually diagnose the vehicle, which he was getting paid to do. And then he would replace another component, which he would get paid on. And that kind of stuff is what gives us all, independent and dealership alike, a bad name in this industry.
Yeah. So let's go back to, all right, the write-up, the diagnosis, what the technician wrote. This is where AI, in my opinion, sets you apart from the others. Because say the technician went and did every concern that you talked about, 50 mile an hour, turning a corner, uphill on a sunny day on your way to grandma's house, on Hines Drive, this is when it makes this noise. What if the technician gave the AI all the bullet points, went out to the car, started the car, popped the hood, listened for noises, no noises verified, drove the car per customer complaint, and went right down, test drove it here, went there. Now, keep in mind, he's speaking to a microphone, right?
Yeah.
Drove down 96, took a right at Evergreen, got back on 96 West, back to the shop, spent about 36 minutes, whatever. And he said, AI, write this up. And all of a sudden, you got 6 paragraphs of what this guy did. It's a lot easier for you to go, okay, this is the time we spent, and this are the things we did in this hour. The customer's going to be like, man, they really went the extra mile. That's going to be a lot easier to sell versus could not duplicate problem.
Right. Right. So here's the thing, and this is as somebody that spoke to customers time and time again with these things, and sometimes I had zero information and sometimes I had great information, and this is why I know that there's a clear difference here. So when a customer just paid a dealership, say $200 for diagnostics, and that $200 gets them an hour, and the only words I say is, we haven't been able to duplicate your concern. If you'd like us to continue trying, it'll be another hour. The first thing that runs through their mind is I'm already promised you 200 plus tax and fee. So what did that 200 get me other than you haven't been able to figure it out? Did your technician spend 5 minutes with the car, 10 minutes with the car, 30 minutes with the car? How do you actually verify that I've spent an hour with that vehicle? Because truth be told, sometimes technicians do not spend an hour with that vehicle before they say no problem found. Sometimes they spend 15 minutes with that vehicle, give up, and still want that hour. That does occur. And we need to have that information for our customers. What have we done so far? Well, giving road names and stuff like that, like in your example, was perfect. My technician took the vehicle out. He went up, 22, and he tried to get it up to 55 to 60, and then he slowed way down, like you said too. And he did that a couple of times. He even tried it on a couple of different roads, uphill, downhill. He actually parked it, let it cool off, got in it, tried it again. What did I do with that hour? Once that technician knows that, as you said, they really went the extra mile to even document it, to say, hey, we did all these things with your vehicle and we still can't duplicate the concern, but we believe you. We know you don't want to drop off your vehicle for nothing. I believe you that this is happening. I would love to explore this further. I just need additional time authorized from you to do so. And that conversation goes over so much smoother with that customer. And what you also do is you retain a customer, because that's transparency and honesty. And that customer is worth a lot to your shop, and you want to keep them in that shop. So giving them those notes, maybe they say no to the authorization, but they'll still bring that vehicle back because they feel like they can trust you because you were so transparent with them and told them exactly what you did with their hour.
No, I agree with that totally, and that has really changed everything for us writing it out. And most people, they get on my post and like, well, I use ChatGPT. There's a difference between using OpenAI ChatGPT
Right.
as a regular chat versus programming it. And one thing that I would like to say on this podcast, I've said it 100 times, I'll say it 101, is I programmed our GPT for like Garrett Auto and Truck to talk a certain way, to write it out a certain way. We don't use bullet points. We don't use numbers. We don't use emojis. We use it in paragraph, layman terms. We don't want to overcomplicate things. So my service advisors don't have to think about ChatGPT. Can get out of hand. Most people don't realize if it's not trained, it goes off the rails and it can just babble. So you don't want to put a bunch of fluff in there so you look like you're full of shit. So you have to program the GPT to write it, very concise and keep it down. Mm-hmm. So it's not huge. You can say, hey, if this is a complicated problem, write this complicated, step by step, everything you did, it will. But for the most part, we just write a simple diagnosis or write up, estimate or whatever, a certain way every time so it doesn't get out of hand. And that's what most people just using Chat GPT. It works, but it puts emojis in and all kinds of stuff, and people look like a kindergartner wrote it. You know what
Yeah.
I mean, with the crayons.
Yeah.
So that's the things that people need to understand. AI has its definite place, and it's changed everything here. Like I'm working on a GPT right now, and there's going to be some API programming and stuff like that at the collision shop. We had a truck towed in the other day, and the guy's like, I need an estimate right away. So I go out there and take 2 pictures of the estimate of the truck being wrecked from the angles. It was front end hit. And then I take a picture of the VIN. We've programmed it now to decode the VIN, look up all the parts, and do a visual estimate on it. So we get an hour labor for going out there, taking the pictures, putting all the information, and give the customer a visual estimate because we know the thing's a total. So we have it programmed to go out there to find out what the vehicle's worth and how much the repair is going to be on a percentage. So if it goes over 80 or 85, it's a total loss. And I think that's going to help the service writers here.
Yeah, I love that. So, working in the collision world, I've never been a collision advisor, but I work very closely with many of them because my customers sometimes would come in with a collision concern and a mechanical concern simultaneously. I had to see both through. It took a lot of time to walk out to the vehicle and write down, this is bent, this is broken, this is scratched, and doing that, preliminary estimate. And then you go back in, you have to get all the parts numbers, source them, create an estimate, reach out, talk about. I mean, sometimes it takes more than an hour, and that's all you're getting is an hour. Now, it's such a cool idea with AI. You can take that picture, it can automatically dive right in and say, scratch here, dent here, this is broken, this will need to be replaced, and it can get that preliminary estimate. That way we know at least we have to replace this, because as you know, when you tear it down, you start to find other things, and we can't do that during that hour, and customers know that, insurance companies know that as well. But to save that kind of time for that advisor, and then what's that advisor set up to do? Now, here's the thing, is you're going to get technicians saying, well, what do we need them for then? What do we need service advisors for if we have AI? Well, now your service advisor is set up to do what their most valuable function is, and that's develop that relationship with that customer to retain them within your business. AI can't do that because a personal relationship cannot be. I mean, there's some people that talk to AI a little too much, in my opinion, but AI cannot develop that personal relationship with your brand to that customer. Service advisors do that. But if they're constantly staring at a computer screen, taking notes and typing up estimates, they can't communicate to your customers. Now we're letting AI do that work, that repetitive work, that estimate work, that preliminary estimate work. And what's that service advisor able to do? Strike up a conversation with that customer, talk about how that AI is working for them, and drive a relationship forward that actually retains that customer within your business.
Absolutely. And we actually sat down and figured out how long it would have took us to do that estimate, just a visual estimate, calling the dealer, getting these parts, typing into the computer, da 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 da. That's a 4-hour job.
Mm-hmm.
That truck had $131,000 worth of damage to it. Okay, so going to your point, look how much time we saved that advisor. Now he can go down his list. Now, I know at the dealerships, every morning they text or call their customers for updates. They're supposed to. I don't know if every dealerships. I know some of the dealerships around us do it, but they're kind of lackadaisical at it.
Sure.
We do it at my shops though because I think it's important because that keeps your phone from starting to ring with everybody in the first thing in the morning. They're on their way to work. They're calling you. What about my car? If you send texts or leave voicemails, that stops the phone from getting blowing up when you're trying to intake. In the morning, everybody knows your intake, your texts are doing checkouts, da 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 da. Right. In the afternoon, the work happens. So usually the time in the afternoon, also is when the text can give the update or the service advisor can give the updates because all the work is going on. All the work is sold for the morning. And one thing I do 100% agree with you on, people do not respect service advisors' time. When you're trying to do an estimate, you're halfway through it, and you're trying to think about what you're writing, what you're doing, and the tech wants to come out here and show you something. You have to get up from your desk, walk all the way out to the shop. 6 people say, hey, how you doing, buddy? You talk to your friends, and by the time you get back, you already forgot at your desk, where was I? And that was a half hour, 45 minutes later. So AI definitely has its place, and I understand it's a tool, and I maximize it to my benefit. I look at problems in my shops, and that's what I do with it. For instance, here's another thing. Service advisors looking up the right type of fluids. If you're an independent versus a dealer, you still have to go over to send your estimate to the parts counter, right? Oils and fluids, all the different types in these cars. We've set the GPT up now where we can type the VIN number in or ask it, and it'll give us the filter numbers. I have it cross it to all the manufacturers, the fluids, all that stuff. That has saved us so much time up front. And for the first 2 weeks we used it, we've checked to make sure it was correct, and it was correct. That's just saved service advisors a bunch of time there too, just fluids alone and filters.
Yeah, I mean, even just double checking parts lists. So in the dealer world, it works a little differently. As an advisor, I typically don't have to worry about like sourcing which fluid goes to which vehicle because we deal with a lot of the same vehicles. So it's usually the same oil and everything that we already
And
have on hand. And we have a parts department that handles all of that stuff as well. But parts lists are very, very important. For example, warranty. So if the vehicle goes manufacturer warranty, not extended, this is manufacturer, that base bumper to bumper. We're not supposed to say that anymore, but that base manufacturer warranty or powertrain. So if I drive a Ford F-150 that was built this year, it's under those warranties, and Ford would actually pick up the tab if it's an actual warranted concern, which typically it is if it's a manufacturer defect, meaning it broke on its own and there's no external forces, so we didn't wreck the truck or anything. You got to have your parts list in order. If you're missing one component, and Ford's a great example because they have one-time use bolts. So if they did an audit and they look at a repair order and they paid us $2,000 on a warranty job for a customer, they can look at it several months later, a year later, whatever, and look at it and say, hey, you forgot one of your one-time use bolts. We likely used it on the vehicle, but we can't verify that because it's missing off of this repair order here, off this invoice, and they can actually back claim that entire payout, and we'd actually have to owe that back to the manufacturer, and a dealership would actually have to eat it. So having more than just a human set of eyes, which is a very tired set of eyes because they're doing so much, to look it over and say, hey, this is the warranty procedure. Here's the read up from the manufacturer. These are the parts lists we need. Please verify that everything is here and the part numbers are correct. And it can actually check that repair order and say, yes, you're good to go. If there's an audit, you're not going to have any issue with this. So that's one way that AI can be leveraged, like you're saying, but in the dealer world to ensure that people are getting paid, the dealership is retaining what they need to retain from the OEM and so forth.
so I'd imagine that there's probably a database out there where if you, as a dealer service advisor, you could build a GPT to put all these recall or all these procedures in the lists, or you could just individually upload one at a time. Like you do if you're doing a lot of
Yeah.
F-150s or whatever, just upload that one and say, okay, I need the complete parts list, and you could actually it would spit it out off of that. Just do me a summary of just the parts list, and you could always put it right next to your screen and
Yeah.
look to save to save you. That would work. And the thing is about that, yes, you could do it as a human, but that would probably take you 15, 20 minutes, where that would do it in 30 seconds.
Right. And when you're talking about just like list comparisons, make sure everything here is already over here in this other document. Humans are going to make mistakes there all the time, right? Because we're going to cross communicate and stuff like that. But a machine like AI, that's something AI is actually very, very, very good at. Like AI does make mistakes and hallucinates and does these things. But if you're asking like, hey, X, Y, and Z is on this document, is X, Y, and Z on this document? That's like a one-to-one check. AI is going to be right on that like 99% of the time. So you're going to save yourself a lot of hassle on the parts side. But there's also the labor side. Um, I'm sure you've seen on social media where technicians complain about their labor times on the warranty side of the house, right? Being like super low or whatever. Like I only get half the time that I should get if this job went customer pay. So if there's a water pump being replaced on my Jeep Gladiator under customer pay, so I owe money for it. It's like a 4 hour job. I don't know if that's actually it, but let's say it's a 4 hour job. If it went under manufacturer warranty, it's probably a 2 hour job. So the manufacturer gets a massive, and there's certain states where this isn't a thing anymore. They've actually legalized to where they legislated to where this can't be, where manufacturers have to pay that customer pay rate. But that's not everywhere right now, and there's some follow-on issues with that. But anyways, so that technician has to do the same job, same work to the same vehicle, but since it's manufacturer paying for it, they have to take half the pay, which I don't like. I don't think that's cool. What a lot of people don't know on the business side, though, is that's not the only discount the manufacturer gets. The manufacturer also has its own rate per hour. So if our door rate's $200 an hour, the manufacturer might only pay $150 an hour. And they're getting a discount on the hours. So not only are they paying half as many hours, sometimes they're paying half as much money per hour. So the manufacturers are getting these massive discounts. Now, on the money side, not talking hours, on the money side, there are ways to increase how much the manufacturer has to pay you per hour. You can actually increase it up to your door rate. You can reach that 200, but the manufacturer has some things they're going to look at to see if you can actually earn that. This is what a lot of people don't know. Is what the manufacturer does is they come in and they audit all of your invoices and all of your repair orders. And they want to see primarily what stories the technicians have been putting in there. Now, a lot of people think that it's the warranty tickets they look at. Now, if you look at a warranty ticket from Technician A and you look at a customer pay ticket from Technician A, you're going to see two very drastically different stories for the exact same concern. Why? Because warranty won't pay if the story is not pristine. Customers will pay if the story is not pristine. So they kind of take a break on the customer pay side and write a really lackadaisical story, whereas on the warranty side, they'll actually sit down and do it the right way. A lot of people think that when they do an audit, they're going to come in and look at those warranty write-ups. They're not. They actually look at the customer pay. And the reason behind that is the OEM says if you want me to pay customer pay dollars per hour, meaning $200 an hour, because that's what you charge your customers, I need to see what quality your technicians are putting into their invoicing on the customer pay side. And what to do is they'll open it up and they'll look at it, and it'll be a bunch of misspelled words, no pronunciation, very not well explained concerns or corrections or anything like that. And the manufacturer will say, well, why would I give you more money per hour? And then they'll walk away and you have to wait like 12 to 24 months before you can try again. So technicians can really affect the bottom line for their dealerships if they write proper stories for customer pay. And if we leverage AI to do that, it'll help them out a lot. And perhaps we can actually incentivize technicians to do this on the customer pay side, because if the dealership can make that much more money on the OEM side through this audit process, that means technicians directly, like they already directly affect the bottom line, but they directly affect the bottom line in a way that no one else under that rooftop can actually do. A lot of people don't know that side of the story when it comes to warranty.
Very interesting. And, I was sitting there thinking when you're talking about that, if the technicians this need to write the stories, if you came out and you wrote a program with AI that every time these guys wrote this story, you printed it and you named it. And then after, at the end of the week, you could upload it into chat and have it make one sheet and one knowledge sheet, because you're only allowed to put 20 files up into the GPT when you're building it. But there's programs out there where you could parse it all together and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You could do quite a bit of stuff. Like you could have an F-150 GPT, and then your technicians could be like, hey, pull up the 1-1-13 whatever repair we do under warranty. Or you could put the same story in both places. It'd be very interesting to do, but it's hard enough to get these guys to do the videos. Now, I watched your video when you're talking about the guy, how the communication, you have to be a photographer and you have to know how to, okay, right?
Yeah.
I agree with that 100%. I don't make my guys do videos. We take pictures. If something's really tore up, we put a picture, right, in there, and we show the customer the pictures and stuff like that. And that's a lot easier than trying to do a video, because videos, you can get people motion sickness. And we always, if we're doing like a repair, we take pictures all the way through the repair and put them up there. My guys do. So we have start to finish pictures. That kind of tells a story. But I think let's switch gears to the dealer programs. They're kind of shitty, and they're not like the aftermarket programs. So they're kind of hard for the text and everybody to use or to convey unless they're getting better. But aren't they like Linux or DOS based with the green screen and the cursors? Or are they getting Are they Windows based now?
So it's getting better. So I've worked. Are you talking like DMS, like what we use for our repair order
Yeah.
invoicing? Yeah. So there's lots of them out there. CDK is super popular, but I've never used CDK. I've used DealerTrack and I've used Reynolds and Reynolds. Reynolds and Reynolds is a good example of what you're getting at, because Reynolds and Reynolds had what I call blue screen, and we all called it that because it was literally a blue screen. It looked like you're on like a 1980s computer. You know what I mean? Like a
Emulator.
Oh yeah. But
Yeah.
I loved it though, Kevin, because I was so good at it. I knew all the key things. There was no mouse. You couldn't point and click on this thing. Everything was a key control. So you had to control all this and that. I was so fast at it, but it took me forever to learn it. They've actually since upgraded. They have what's called Reynolds and Reynolds Ignite now, which is much better. It's point and click with drop down menus and things like that, and it's super more efficient. So they actually have pretty decent software when it comes to DMSs. The problem that they run into is it's not always the best for writing long stories, because sometimes your box is only like an inch tall and it doesn't get bigger. So when you're typing it, you're like, you don't even know what you wrote 4 lines ago unless you scroll back up. So that's not super helpful. Not every DMS is that way. Of course, we have DMS outages and things like that do occur, and sometimes you lose information that way. But they're decent enough. They get the job done. Here's what the problem actually is, though, is a lot of dealerships make people log into like 7 different things every single morning for scheduling, for multi-point inspections, for write-ups, for invoicing, all these different functions. But the thing is most DMSs, now DMS, if I didn't say before, stands for Dealer Management System. That's your DealerTrack, CDK, Reynolds and Reynolds, those systems that dealerships are going to use to write the repair orders and do the invoicing. They actually can do all of those functions. They can set appointments. They have a multi-point inspection feature where they'll spit out a multi-point inspection sheet, stuff like that. But a lot of dealerships don't use all those functions. They don't train on how to use those functions, and they'll actually parcel and outsource those different functions to different softwares. So the problem really comes into play when I have to log into like 5 different softwares to do one repair order. That's really the problem that I see in the dealerships.
Oh yeah, that's horrible for sure. Um, and I think a lot of the dealerships finally upgraded to two monitors for the service advisors.
Not all of them, but yes, I have seen that. I can't believe my entire time being an advisor. Actually, one dealership, I actually had two monitors. My entire time being an advisor, my three other dealerships, I had one very small, tiny monitor that was rather old, and it was very difficult to work with. And like I just said, I have to work with like 7 different softwares, 5 different softwares, which means I only have one screen. So I have like on the top left, my scheduling, the bottom right, I have my repair orders, and it's so small. I'm leaning in, squinting, trying to read it, and it's not very useful. So invest in your team, dealerships, everybody, shops. 2 monitors per advisor, at least in my opinion, is a way to set them up for success. That's a very good point.
So when we moved from Mitchell over to Shopwares, I bought all new laptops for the guys' toolboxes. I bought printers for their toolboxes. I bought lube sticker printers and key tag printers for their toolboxes. So all my guys have laptops. They have printers and everything on their toolbox with all the information systems right at their toolbox. Now we've built a GPT, which is on their phone and on their computers too. My service advisors all have 2 screens because, man, it just makes life so much easier for everybody if you have 2 screens trying to do work. As far as your productivity just doubles, obviously, if you've got 2 screens versus one.
Yeah.
And that's really helped. And, it cost me a mint to buy everybody laptops and my mouse. I got them all wireless mice and all that stuff. But, at the end of the day, it makes their life so much easier. And you don't want them carrying a laptop around with a wiring diagram. So right at their toolbox, they print up a wiring diagram. Okay? They don't have to walk across your shop because if a guy's walking across your shop, people are stopping him to bullshit with him and everything else. He just prints it and goes on with his work, which that's really sped things up for us.
And that speaks to efficiency. So and that can actually segue into flat rate. Flat rate's such a hot topic on social. I know you've seen it. I've been seeing your posts. My posts have been on fire with flat rate. They always are. Flat rate's like the devil, right? It's what's tearing this industry apart. If we get away from flat rate, technicians will be so much more successful. That's the narrative that we often see. Now, it's not everybody. Typically, the people that are super successful actually want flat rate to stay because they'd make less money off of flat rate. But what something like that does when a leader steps in and does things like provide resources to make people more efficient, that right there keeps your technicians in their bays for a maximum amount of time every day. Every time a technician's in their bay, they stand a chance of making money. Every time a technician's outside of their bay, they do not stand a chance of making money if they're on flat rate. So it's important that we provide technicians and service advisors with resources as leaders to set them up for success, to create a more efficient and a more effective process. Effective plus efficient equals productive, which means it's a more productive process. And if it's a more productive process with resources involved, that means they can be more productive, which means they'll produce more flat rate hours, which is good for the business, yes, but it's so good for the technicians and the advisors as well. So this narrative where flat rate is the end all be all problem, I'm not bought in. I do a lot of research in this area. I'm not bought in that if we just eliminated flat rate tonight and went to an hourly and hourly bonus or with a bonus or whatever tomorrow, if we went to a different pay scheme other than flat rate, I don't think the industry would be rescued. I don't think the shortage would heal. I don't think all these things would happen. I think that we would still have issues with pay. We would still have issues with efficiency. We would still have issues with liking our jobs. And that really boils down to good or bad leadership. I really do think that.
Well, it's kind of funny you say that. So let's start out with what happens if everybody goes to hourly, salary, or unionize. You're a guy, we'll start out with union. You're a guy who turns 60 hours a week, kicks ass, and there's a guy right 3 bays down from you who's always on his phone, always dicking around and stuff like that. He does 20 hours. Guess what the union is going to do? They're going to reward that guy for being lazy. He's going to make the same thing because you're going to negotiate a contract. Everybody's going to get painted with the same brush. So that's where union's a problem in the shop. Okay. And we've heard that. I've heard that over and over on my posts. These guys are like, yeah, we had the union come in. It was a disaster. And my dad worked for one of the big dealer chains, and they had one shop. I believe it was maybe in New Jersey or Boston or something like that went union. It lasted a year and a half, and they kicked the union out of there. The techs did. They said this was the worst thing they ever did. Okay, so union has its place once again, but it's not in the dealership world. Now, my thought is this. Back when I first started in this business, I was making $400 a week, and I've said this 100 times, at Hal's Auto Clinic, salary. Every hour I worked over 40, I made less money, okay? When I got to the point after a couple of years where I was the heavy engine guy, back then we were doing in the 90s, you're doing engines 5 or 6 a month. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They were just nonstop. At 5 o'clock, when I was salary and I could stay another hour and a half and finish that job, I'd be like, peace out. I would go home. Later, when I became commissioned, I got 40% of the labor. Guess what would happen? I would stay that extra hour and a half, button that thing up, test drive it. Nobody would be there to bother me, finish everything up. Next day, I could start a fresh job. That's how I made my paycheck. I was okay with that. Not everybody in today's world is okay with that. Now, this goes back to, people, they call, these guys call me a boomer. Well, I'm not a boomer. I'm Generation X, okay? But most people don't realize the boomers are the ones that did it right because they hold 52% of the wealth in America right now, okay? These are the guys that have a house down here in Michigan. They have a house up north. They have a house in Florida. These guys are the guys that were smart with their money, managed their money, okay? These newer generations, they think everything should be handed to them, okay? Us older guys, we worked for everything we had, we have now. And I think they have the entitlement thing going on with the new generations. Well, if I'm going to come in here, you're going to pay me even if I don't do something. Well, that's not kind of how it works, okay? And that's where leadership is important. We'll go back to leadership. At my shops in the independent world, my body shop, the guys are hourly, okay? Because the way the insurance companies mess us around and do everything else, it just takes too much time. It'll be too hard for me to do the accounting to pay these guys flat rate, and they wouldn't make no money, and I just was like, it would crash and burn. So these guys are hourly. At my repair shop down in Farmington, I got 2 guys flat rate, and I got 1 guy now. I moved one of the other guys out to the collision shop. He is hourly. I had a conversation with him last week. I said, your efficiency is horrible. You have to pick up your efficiency. You're going to need to find a new job. I've been training you long enough. It's time for you to step up. I said, I could put you on flat rate right now, but that's not going to help me, and it's not going to help you. You're going to crash and burn. I've invested in you, so I'm not stopping now, but you need to pick up the pace. He said, you're right. I really appreciate you doing this with me. My other 2 guys, they're on flat rate. I've asked them several times, do you guys want to go hourly? Because let's face it, here's what these guys aren't realizing. If you have your labor rate set right and you pay your guy hourly, you're making way more profit on that hour of labor than flat rate. These guys don't get that. I would like to have my guys hourly because 9 times out of 10, my shop is busy. Now, we all know why flat rate and commission came around. Most people probably never took this into consideration. Commission was a percentage of the labor. It was 40 or 45, right? What they realized is every year they would come along and raise their labor rate, what would happen? The technicians would get a raise.
Mm.
So now they said, well, wait a second here. Let's put them on flat rate, which would just give them a set hourly rate. So whatever our door rate is, if it goes up, they don't automatically get a raise. That's how flat rate came about. I remember that whole thing came about, which is kind of funny because I remember going from 40 to 45, and that was a huge, 5% was a big bump. So I don't think getting rid of what you're saying, get away with flat rate, is going to change anything. What I think is management and management styles and leadership need to step in. I'll give you an example. On Tuesday night is the end of our pay period. Don't ask me why my pay period is Wednesday to Tuesday. It's been that way for 100 years, and we just have left it that way. The service advisors do payroll. When we close, the service advisors do payroll. And they've called me now. They used to call me. Now I built a GPT, which I don't know if did you put that one up, Jason, yet for the 12-minute one about the GPT, about the efficiency? I actually make a report. So my service advisors just pull up the GPT and say, Jason was here 40 hours. He did 56 hours of labor. Nick was here. Jason was blah, blah, blah. And it'll put out their efficiency. And if their hours are low, it flags me and emails me and goes, hey, so-and-so's only going to get a 13-hour paycheck. So I'll call the service advisors and go, hey, or from there, go, hey, what's up? Well, he worked on this job right here, and he worked on it for 4 days this week. Okay, where's he at on it? Oh, he's half done. If they hit the 50% mark, guess what we do? We pay them the first 50% of that job.
Nice.
So I'm very, very dialed into what these guys make a week. So I always make sure they at least get 40 hours, if all possible, if they get stuck on a job. I consider that me running a business to make sure my people are taken care of. At the dealership, I would imagine they wouldn't give a shit if a guy was going to get paid 13 hours or 90 hours. It would just kind of, that's the way the system works, buddy. And that's why I think flat rate is a big problem for people, because the leadership is not looking at the end of the week or end of the pay period and go, okay, Chris has been stuck on this engine job, but he got halfway done with it. Chris, it pays 40 hours. We're going to give you 20 on this. So your paycheck's now going to be 32 or 40 or whatever versus going, it sucks to be Chris. And that's what I think where the management sits in his office with his feet up on the desk and doesn't worry about it. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't there shop foremans in a dealership? The guy has a shop foreman title.
Yeah, so the shop foreman thing, this is I actually just recently posted on this. This is a very big point of contention in the dealership world. Now, I've worked with two shop foremans out of the four dealerships I was in, so not every dealership will have this position. I think they should. I really do. But how you compensate that person and what they're responsible for will determine whether or not it's successful. In my experience, it's been successful when that shop foreman is not turning wrenches anymore unless truly needed with a very convoluted warranty concern that a technician is going to lose their hind end on because you only get so much warranty out of it no matter how much time you spend on it, but you have to work on it because you're the manufacturer's representative, etc. When you pay a shop foreman on a salary or hourly or even a bonus, a gross profit percentage, a pay plan similar to an advisor, that sets that foreman up financially to be a true support role, a mentor, and a quality control agent in that shop. And I've seen that work extremely well, very, very, very well. Helps technicians not lose time on flat rate. Meaning if I'm a technician, I'm on flat rate, and I get this warranty concern, it's a no problem found, but the manufacturer wants me to keep digging, but they're not paying for it, but it's under warranty. I can pass it off to my foreman. He can follow that through. He's still getting paid because he's not on flat rate, and no one's losing their hind end on this thing. So it works out really well. Unfortunately, most people that I've talked to in the industry, when they have a foreman, their foreman is what's called a working foreman. So he's still trying to work flat rate. That's how he gets paid, but he's the shop foreman. So he's in a bay working on cars all day. Do you think he has time to be a foreman? No. But what do? Because he's a foreman, they delegate the responsibility of dispatching work to the shop to the foreman who's on flat rate. And what we see that turn into is the foreman is killing it with 60 hours a week, and all the other technicians tend to starve because they get everything the foreman doesn't want to work on. And who do you think gets all the breaks, the gravy work, the fluid flushes, and everything? The foreman's going to eat first because that conflict of interest is there baked into the pay plan. The pay plans are honestly part of the problem because they're so in opposition of like what the true mission should be for the shop. And then we see that foreman eating really, really good, and all the technicians are suffering and starving. And unfortunately, I see a lot of technicians say, well, flat rate's the problem. It's like, no, your shop foreman right there, your leader is the problem in this equation. If we fix that, I think that you'll be doing pretty well on flat rate because the work's there, and I know you can do it. You're just not receiving it.
Yeah, my number two, who's a 10% owner and vice president of my shop down in Farmington, he is a working shop foreman, but we'll just say his paycheck starts between $700 and $1,000 a week for showing up. His
Right.
flat rate hours go on top of that.
Right.
Why is that? Because he has to go around and babysit the guys when they have problems and go and help them over the hurdles. A lot of times if he gets overwhelmed and I happen to be there, I'll go out there and do that particular thing. Now, let's go ahead and move right into what my job as a business owner in the independent world is. My job is to oversee everything. If I work in the shop as a owner of a repair shop, I will get fixed cars. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
If I'm good,
Yeah.
I would go out and fix cars.
Of course.
If I work on the shop, work up front, I'm going to sell jobs. But my job is to delegate, set up policies, procedures, and stay out of the way. It took me so long to understand it. I remember exactly when I decided I wanted to back myself out of the equation. Everybody's a shop owner when they start out. Their name's on the front of the building. They want everybody to know they're the owner. You're going to go around. You're going to whip every car's ass. You're going to do whatever. But as I got older, what I realized, I came back from vacation one time, and Steve Garrett was still there. His dad started the place, and he was my partner. And I came back, and all the guys were pissed off. I'm like, hey, what's up? And I went and looked in the office. I'm like, holy shit, you guys didn't do nothing last week. The sales were terrible, and all the bays are full. What's going on? They said, literally, we would go to Steve to write up a job, and he said, well, you'll have to wait till Kevin gets back. He'll be back here next Monday. He's like, but it's Wednesday, and I'm on flat rate. He said these guys would make no money. And I'll bring Jason on to back the stories up. He's like, dude, when you would go on vacation, we'd be like, oh my God, this is horrible. And they didn't do anything because he wanted to make sure I got back when I would diagnose the cars with the people. Mm-hmm. At that point, I realized, okay, me being part of the equation to keep the shop flowing is a bad idea. And most guys need to take this into consideration. If you're a small repair shop and say it's a family run business, you're there, your wife's there, your kids there, or whatever. What happens if you're the guy that everybody has to go to and you drop dead tomorrow? The place crashes and burns. I'm not going to say that if you have everything in place, it's not going to, sales aren't going to dip or whatever. There's going to be a whole other set of problems if you drop dead and die, right?
Mm-hmm.
But and the third point of this before we go back is investment groups. They're buying independent shops. To make your shop worth a lot of money, you have to be an absentee owner. The shop runs without you. The policies, procedures, and everything is in place. So when they come in there and say, if we buy your shop, what happens if you leave? Well, nothing. I'm not there anyway. So they could take the money you take out of there as cash flow. And that's why people want to buy business for the cash flow, these investment groups. Okay, most people, they take this into consideration. So building the procedures and the policies are so paramount to people's success, they don't even realize it. What is a policy? I'll give you a stupid one. Dumpsters have gotten out of control to empty a dumpster. And if they go over the rim, they charge you an extra $125, right? We have a policy, how to cut up your cardboard policy before you put it in the dumpster. Okay? Policies, guys get them, they read them, they print them, they sign them. So when you go back over to Chris Craig, go, Chris, you threw all the boxes back in the dumpster. Well, I didn't know that. Well, that's funny. On this date, you signed it. That's what a policy does, right?
Mm-hmm.
People don't realize that there could be dumb policies, but long as you do a policy, you can keep the place going going the same way. And the other thing is too, is you remove yourself from the procedure and leave it alone. Because I literally walk in every once in a while, it gets me. I'm not going to say I'm perfect. There's something walking, I walk by and I stop and I interject. And I don't know the whole story. I look like an asswipe and I short circuit the whole system. I did it last week at Motor City on a trailer. They put new cables on a trailer and I walked in there and they're looking at it and they're all looking at it. Man, this was tough to do. And I look at it, go, man, wait a second. The cables are crooked. Wait, that looks like they're backwards. And they're like, no. And I'm like, yeah, you guys got it backwards. That's why it's not working. Come to find out, I had them unwind it, switch it around the way I thought. And guess what? They were right. I
Yikes.
looked at the guys. I go, fuck, I just cost you guys a couple hours. Thank God you get paid hourly. I go, I messed this guys up. I messed this up. I should have stayed right out of it. They're like, yeah, you should listen to your own rules. I'm like, you're right. So I do the same thing, but most guys can't help themselves. They really can't.
It goes back to what we started with. It's ego. It's 100% ego. So a good example of it, I'm not a Patriots fan, but when Tom Brady left the Patriots suffered for a season or two. They didn't do that great. Why? They built a team around one person, this amazing quarterback. And then you
Great
lose that one
analogy.
person, and then all of a sudden what happens to the team? It falls apart. So we don't want that. I want my quarterback to come out of the game and I want my team to continue producing. So in leadership, you mentioned the word delegate. That is essentially what leaders do, right? They delegate. They oversee and they delegate. They create policy procedure, they oversee and they delegate. Now, this is what leaders get wrong in my experience, especially in the dealer world. You have fundamentally two things that you can delegate as a leader. One is responsibility and the other is authority. A leader has both of those things at the measure of 100%. How do I know this? If your shop starts to fail, Kevin, it's on you 100% because you own it or anybody that co-owns it with you. It's going to be your problem to solve and fix. The employees will have a part of that, but again, they'll find a job somewhere else if everything goes belly up. So that's your responsibility. Now, unless you give equity to people, you really can't delegate that responsibility. But what you can do is that 100% authority, because it's your business, your choice, you do whatever you want with it, you can delegate pieces of your authority to other people. And you can do that through that policy, right? I am giving you the authority to oversee that the dumpsters have cardboard that is broken down properly, and then you make decisions based on that. I just don't want to see an overflowing dumpster. It is your job to solve this. It's your job to do this. It's your job to oversee the dumpster, for example. I'm giving you my power to do what you need to do with this dumpster. I'm still ultimately responsible because I pay for the dumpster, but you have the authority to take care of that dumpster. I've trained you on how to do it. If I see you starting to lean a little too far right, I will position you back to the left. If I see you going left, I'll bring you back right. But ultimately, I'm not here to micromanage. This is what I need from you. You are trained and ready to do this. If you have questions, ask. But other than that, I'm not going to be in the way. You go ahead and do what you have to do. What leaders do in the
I
dealership
agree.
world, unfortunately, is they delegate all of their responsibility and
With
hold
no
the
authority.
authority. Why? because of my ego. I want the power. I want to be able to make all the decisions. All of you other people are peasants in comparison to me. If you need something, it comes to me. Kevin, I had to ask permission to give veteran discounts as a service member myself. And I knew how to verify if people actually served. To go and get somebody a 10% discount because they served, I had to go get manager permission. That's ridiculous. Now, that's exactly what I'm talking about. So, what they'll do is they'll delegate the responsibility to me. So, if the gross profit starts to dip a little bit, they're knocking on my door as an advisor. Why is the gross profit low? Like, what do you mean? I don't control the whole gross profit. I control my gross profit, but not everyone else's. I have no authority in this area, but yet I'm being held responsibly for it. That's not how it's supposed to go. So they're holding on to that egotistic, like, I want to have all the power and the authority. They're delegating all of their responsibility because responsibilities are hard. What they're doing is they're delegating responsibilities. That's the responsibility of a shop owner or a manager, etc. And they're delegating those responsibilities to people that are not qualified to have them. That's why they're not the owner or the manager. That's why they're the advisor at this time. Haven't hit that part in their growth, in their career progression. So you're delegating responsibilities to people that aren't qualified for it, and you're handcuffing them because you're not giving them the authority to shoot, move, and communicate to actually fulfill those responsibilities because you want to hold on to the power. What you got to do is flip that 100%. How I rate a leader, everyone says it's not tangible. You can't rate leadership. I think I can rate it. I rate it in how much, and as close to 100%, the better the leader you are, the closer you are to 100% of authority that you've delegated to your team. The idea is I want my team to have as close to 100% authority of my authority as possible so that they can shoot, move, communicate, do the things they have to do, make this business a success, and I'm able to step back. A lot of leaders get insecure because then they think, well, what's the point of me then? If I'm not doing anything, what do they need me for? You're still needed as a leader because you hold that responsibility and you maintain that authority and make sure everybody's doing the right things when they're supposed to be doing them and handling issues as they arise. So fundamentally, you have two things to delegate. You should be delegating as close to 100% of your authority as possible, maintaining the 100% of that responsibility, but you can still hold your people accountable with that authority that you've delegated to them.
Yeah, and most guys, how many times do we ever hear anybody talk about an org chart in an independent shop? I have an org chart in my wall, on my wall in my office. I can take a picture of it. I haven't looked at it in quite a while because we all know, but you know how hard it was for me to, once Jason at Farmington and Jim in Brighton became 10% owners, they had the authority to make decisions, right?
Sure.
Sometimes they would get maybe like, I should probably give them a call. That's fine. But what ended up stopping, I'm going to give you this a quick before I start on it. We need pens for Garrett Auto and Truck. I walked into the service advisor, says, I need to order pens. I said, call PJ. He said, okay, call PJ. A few minutes later, I'm working in my office, I get a text. It's PJ. He's like, hey, I got the pens or this price, blah, blah, blah. I could have easily answered him, said, go ahead and do it. What'd I say? I said, you need to talk to Phil, who has started this whole process, because me getting involved, it's not my job. Go back to him. I think little stupid things like that, you need to follow your layers of command. When anybody has a problem of any type of sort, in my company, it goes up to them two guys. If they see fit, they bring it to me. If they don't, I don't hear about it. Okay? Now, if they make the wrong decision, that's not on them because I gave them authority. We might talk about it and say, I wouldn't have did it this way. But my guys and me are like-minded. We all kind of think alike, so it's not really a problem. But I will tell you, a lot of these shop owners, they want to make all the decisions, and these guys are sitting up front with their hands tied, like you say, and they might have to wait for the owner to get back from golfing or doing this to do their job, and that's not running an effective business. Another thing I do, this is a stupid rule, but my guys, if there's a problem on Friday and I'm not there, because a lot of times I don't work Friday, they don't tell me till Monday. If they can't handle it, they won't call me till Monday. Why? Because as a business owner, I don't need to hear about this Friday at 11 o'clock. I'm sitting up north with my wife or my grandkids or whatever that I've worked for, rightfully so, to take that Friday off, right? And I'm happy about it, and they're all happy I'm not there. I'm sure of it. But they don't ruin my weekend. Because if it can wait till Monday, that's okay, right? If the place is going to burn down, they would call me, obviously, right?
Sure.
But these are the little things I think I hate to use the buzzword mental health, but I think it keeps me from worrying. Because if I knew there's a problem with somebody, I'd want to get on the phone, stop what I'm doing, and deal with the problem. And maybe everybody just needs to cool down over the weekend anyway. We might get a different outlook. People don't take that into consideration. When everybody's all hot and heavy and pissed off, they just got done arguing with your service advisor or whatever. That's not the time for you to call as a customer. You need to wait a little bit. Let everybody cool down. Most people don't get that.
Yeah, I mean, you got to decompress those situations, right? And especially like, what are we going to solve at 5 o'clock on a Friday? We're closing right now or in an hour or whatever. You know what I mean? This is a Monday issue unless it's like the place is literally on fire, as you mentioned. Yeah, you got to take a moment to soak and let those emotions kind of die down so that we can approach this logically. If we're in this heightened state of emotion, we're going to respond to the situation emotionally. And in business, anytime you respond emotionally, it usually results in some sort of a loss. But if you take that moment to step back and get back into a logical place where you can act absence of your emotion and you can actually approach this logically, typically that results in something positive. So those are some important things that we have to pay attention to. The mental health thing is one of those things. That's why part of like what I coach is like how to handle stress and pressure, because automotive service is 100% stress and pressure, 100%. And a lot of people aren't trained on stress management. In the military, I've been trained on stress management because we do a lot of stressful things. And that's why we're so productive in the military in some of the worst situations you can imagine. Now, obviously, automotive service isn't quite like that, but it's still very stressful on people that have not been trained on how to manage stress. And then we wonder why we have a mental health crisis in the automotive service area. And what I mean by that is if you go to the OSHA website, you'll actually notice that automotive technicians, mechanics, last I checked, and this data is still accurate, and I made a post on it within the last 30 to 60 days, so I don't imagine it's changed. They're in the top 10 for suicide rates among all the trades, which is pretty drastic. So, and I think a big part of that is that stress management piece and all these other skills that we don't train technicians on outside of working on cars.
No, I totally agree with that. And, you know, service advisors, it's stressful for technicians, but it's just as stressful for service advisors.
Yeah.
I don't want to say they're a Budweiser commercial, the unsung hero, but them guys take a lot of shit. They're the very first person they see. That's why they get the 5-star reviews.
Yeah.
That's why they get the 1-star reviews. Chris fixed my car. It runs great. Chris messed up my car. It runs horrible. 1-star. Okay. They don't take into consideration. I've actually had over the years, my technicians go, how can he get a 5-star review? I go, what does that tell you? That's the face of the company. When they walk in, they say, they don't take into consideration who fixed the car. Chris fixed the car. When he's not up there typing on the computer, he runs out back with his wrenches and fixes the car. You know, and that's very important that these guys, you know, in the independent world, we do not have the service advisor technician problem at my shops. How's that? In my shops, flat rate works very, very well. I'm sure there's guys somebody was talking about it, and they were talking about a oil switch that paid 4 hours, and the shop owner walked out. The technician goes, "You can do this in an hour and a half. I'm only paying an hour and a half, but even though book time's 4 hours." My thought is, well, wait a second. What if a job pays 4 hours and it took him 8? Are you going to give him the 8? Well, no. Well, you're a shitty shop owner, okay? You just have to stick by the rules. Book time is book time,
100%.
or you're going to get extra if you're in the Rust Belt like we are. Very seldom do we go by the book time. I know that sounds really crazy, but we use it as a guide. We might look at something and go, okay, 1.6 or 2.2 for a V10 exhaust manifold. There's no way he's going to do that in this motorhome chassis on the ground, da-da-da-da. So we're going to get 4.5 hours per side, plus an hour per stud if it breaks. Are you ripping the guy off? No, we're getting paid for what we do. There's nobody else that's going to sit there and drill them studs out underneath the thing. The dealer's going to want to put heads on it. But then again, the dealer wouldn't work on it because it's a motorhome chassis. So the guy kind of has to have us do it. And they're kind of at our will. But we're not ripping anybody off. We're getting the technician paid for his time.
No, so when I was a technician, I grew up in Pennsylvania. So I was right there in the Rust Belt. When I was a technician, I worked on all the rusty cars. When I came down here in the South, I was like, whoa, this is where I should have been all along. It's so much easier down here. But I also wrote service when I was up in Pennsylvania, as well as writing service in the South. I have a pretty wide range of experience. And we also, working in the Rust Belt, we would use that as a labor in time guide. Now, you'll hear me say in a lot of my posts that, as you just said, actually, Kevin, that we have to stick to that as close as possible, right? Because if the technician's going to win, we got to let him win. If he's going to lose, then he's going to lose. But that's how we keep it fair, and we try to help our technician as much as possible. I don't like those scenarios where a job pays 4 hours. We notice that they took an hour to do it, and then we only pay them an hour because that's all they had into it. I think that's crazy because that means they're extremely efficient, and we're rewarding their experience with a pay cut, and that's a big reason. You hear this term all the time: the more you know, the less you make when you're an automotive technician, and that's part of the reason why. But setting that piece aside, yeah, I mean, when you have these extra circumstances, like for example, even if you're not in the north, maybe you're doing head bolts on something, right? What do head bolts typically do when we take them off? They typically break. Now, the labor and time guide will tell you it's, say, I don't know, 2, 3 hours to replace the exhaust manifold. Well, we know that most of those bolts are going to break. So what I did is I said, hey, it's about 2 hours to replace your exhaust manifold, but the bolts tend to break. Let's say there's 5 of them. I know there's typically more, but for the example, we'll say 5. If a bolt breaks, that's 1 additional hour. So at the very least, you'll owe us 2 hours of labor at X, Y, and Z, or you'll owe us this many hours. It'd be 7 hours of labor at X, Y, and Z. That's your worst case scenario. That way, my technician, no matter what happens, is covered. My technicians love that. When I was a service advisor, I would do that. I'm like, listen,
Yep.
if you break every bolt, please, I would say always wait, please try not to. I know you don't want to deal with it. So if you can save the customer's day, you're going to get paid. But if you can't save the customer's day, you're going to get paid. And what did that technician usually do? They usually extracted all the bolts without breaking them because they weren't worried about losing their tail on it. They could actually calmly go through the steps and get the job taken care of. That was better for the customers, better for me, and better for the technician because he didn't lose his butt on the ticket.
No, I agree totally. And, we have meetings every morning, the service advisors and the techs at both shops, actually, and they go through each job that they're working on, where the pitfall is going to be. Should we talk to Kevin? Should we talk to Jason? All that. That has stopped a lot of problems. Tell them what's expected of them. Hey, you can get this alternator job done today. We know that. Do this, this, and this. These are the orders I want you to do it in. A lot of times I don't even tell my guys the orders anymore. They just kind of, once they understood how it works, we just don't.
Mm-hmm.
So, but we tell them most people don't know what's expected of them also. How many of these shop owners go out there and go, hey, we're here 8 hours a day. I'd like to see 90% efficiency out of you, and explain to what it is. Like I told you, that GPT, that the efficiency sheet that we make, they print it out and we give it to each one of them. And they said to me, well, why don't we put everybody on one so we can see what each other's doing? I'm like, that's a good idea. So they literally talk to each other. They laugh and tease. Oh, man, you lost your ass last week. What happened? They're joking. My guys are joking, but they kind of have a little bit of a competition going on hours, which I'm okay with that. Nobody's getting hurt. They're teasing each other. They all get along good. But I couldn't see that happen in a dealership because there's 40 guys.
I've seen it. So I've
30
actually
guys,
I
20.
worked in a dealership where they did that one time actually. It was a shop that had probably 20, 30 technicians in it, and they put a big TV up on the wall, and it was a spreadsheet with all the technicians' names, and it had how many hours they flagged, how many this, how many that. But the part that really got people angry is it had a column for how many comebacks they had this week. And so
Ooh.
so they were racking stacking that as well. And that created, I think, the opposite effect in that shop. The idea was to generate that competition style to where everyone's kind of competing with each other. Maybe the top three get X, Y, and Z as an incentive, whatever that looks like. But I think that one column kind of killed it. But I think overall, you got to, and you sounds like you have it, you got to have good culture in the shop before you introduce something like that. If there's already a bunch of animosity and people don't like each other in the shop and they think that everyone's out to get their hours, or this person's sneaky over here and gets all the tickets from this one writer who favors this one person. There's this animosity and there's this bad culture. When you implement something like that, like a competition, it turns into like bad blood real bad, like a rivalry sports game. But when there's a mutual respect between the two teams, meaning like between technician to technician, and you introduce some sort of a competitive thing, it usually goes really, really well. And that all goes back to the custodian of the shop culture, the leader. That's why I always say all the problems start and end with leadership. So if you as a leader have developed a strong culture in your shop and you introduce some sort of a competitive mindset where maybe you do put a TV on the wall and it has all this information, those technicians will respond to that rather well because there's a positive culture already. If you put something like that, and maybe this is the litmus test, if you put something like that on the wall and your technicians respond negatively and they start fighting even worse than they were before, that means you as a leader has cultivated a very bad culture within your shop and you need to check that out. It begins and ends with leadership every single time.
And I believe culture starts above leadership, because your culture starts, you're setting the tone how we're going to do it. Then here comes the leadership. And my guys know what's expected of them. Even the younger guys know what's expected of them. I don't have to go out there and ask them how they feel.
Yeah.
I don't have to walk out there and go, how do you feel today, Chris? Are you sad? Or are you happy? Okay. And I'm in this, people flame me, but I don't care. My bosses, when I was younger coming up, they didn't give a shit how I felt. They liked me, but when we're at work, we're working. Work is not fun. Work is hard. Okay. And it goes back to that book, what is it? The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F.
I have that book.
You ever, okay. Do you know when they talk about grandpa? When Grandpa
Hmm.
said, "Golly gee, I had a bad day," he walks, he kicks rocks on the way home. He walks in, he eats supper, and he says, "I had a shitty day." He doesn't cry, doesn't complain. He goes to bed and says, "Hopefully tomorrow's better." That's not the culture. That's not the world we live in today. Everybody wants to put how they feel on social media. How sad. I did a thing. I hate that. Okay. All that. I don't walk around and ask my guys how they feel. I really don't. Now, obviously, if I see a huge dip, like I seen one of the dips, I'm not going to mention any name. This one guy just started really having a hard time. I'm like, man, his hours are terrible, and he's moping around. Now, as a leader, I noticed that right away. I walked over and I said, "Hey, come in here. What's going on?" Well, come to find out, he had a sick family member. I don't want to give too much away. Terminal, coming to the end, really bothering him. I said, "Dude, I understand. I've been there. When my girlfriend broke up with me, I drilled the side of a Mercury Villager cylinder head off because I was fucking, my girlfriend broke up with me. I get it." I said, "We're just going to get by this. Trust me when I tell you this, that you're going to be sad for a few weeks, but you will get over it. Just try to focus." And we got on with our life. So I'm not like I don't care. I do notice stuff, but I don't walk out there every day because I think that right there, you're fostering a culture of how do you feel? And I think that's what's wrong with America. Like in the military, if they walked out there and lined you guys up every morning for PT and said, "Let's go one by one. How do you feel physically, mentally? Are you tired?" What would that get? We'll just get a big bitch session, and then all of a sudden, culture is ruined, right? Leadership is letting them tell him how to run the shop because he's going to start to try to curtail how he should act. No, nobody gives a shit. You're soldiers. Get ready to do your push-ups. We're going to run. Cry when you're running. We don't care. Unfortunately, the military seems to be getting softer, and that's a problem.
Yeah, so there's a
You know,
really good, so everyone's probably seen the movie, but I've actually read the book. We Were Soldiers is a really good movie about the Battle of Iradrong Valley in Vietnam, and there's a book that Mel Gibson plays Colonel Hal Moore in that movie. But Colonel Hal Moore, who's a retired now General Hal Moore, wrote a book, and that's what that movie's based on. It's called We Were Soldiers Once and Young, and it's about this very ferocious battle in the Iradrong Valley in Vietnam. And setting the war aside and everything, he has a really good quote in that book, and it kind of hints to what you were just talking about, like how do people feel? Do I really have to go in my shop and be like, "Hey, Mr. Technician, how are you feeling today? Are you happy? Are you sad?" And like survey everybody, like it's awkward, it's weird, it's you're not going to get real answers. How he described it, and he quoted somebody else who I unfortunately cannot remember where the quote actually came from, and I'm paraphrasing to some degree, is that during like say Civil War times, or maybe it was Revolutionary War, it's one of those like back in that era, it was customary for the officers to walk alongside their horses. Officers got horses, the troops had to walk. The officers, it was customary for them to walk beside their horse and carry their backpack and gear and not put it on the horse. Reason being is because as I walk, my soldiers walk, which means I know how long they've been walking. It's really easy to say walk farther when I've been riding a horse all afternoon. Now I know how tired they are because I know how tired I am. I know how much my shoulders hurt from the straps of the weight of my backpack because I'm wearing one just like they are and it weighs the same. I'm able to gauge how my people feel just intuitively with my presence. So, as a shop leader, you don't have to go bay to bay. How do you feel? You just got to take a walk and see how people are looking and acting. You got to take a look at their numbers. Are they dipping down? There's something going on with the culture here. You don't have to ask that question. You just got to be present. And then you can take action from there. So it's not so much, and I agree with you, we don't have to have this sensitive approach like it's okay to have feelings in the shop. Like we don't have to do that. What we have to do though is have like a thumb on the pulse of what's the energy of the shop. I've walked through a lot of shops and you can tell when the energy is at the floor level. And then you can tell when the energy is in the rafters. You can just tell by the energy when you walk through. Are people generally happy? Are they playing music? Are they shouting back and forth? Or are they all just dragging their feet and they're kind of throwing things around and they seem really upset? You can just tell. You don't have to say a word. You just got to walk and you got to listen.
I could tell you one spot where I failed as a leader, and I didn't even realize I was failing as a leader. I had a guy that worked for me for 28 years,
Mm.
and he went downhill the last 4 years to the point where he was a cancer in my shop. The way he acted, everything, he just the tone level was in the toilet. I kind of felt like I owed the guy the respect to keep him because we started out together as techs, and he's worked for me for a lot of years. I was the best man at his wedding, so I'm like, okay. And finally, the one day, twice a year, I'd have to pull him in the office, give him the old that a boy, and he would be fine. He'd fly straight for 6 months or so, and then
Yeah.
all of a sudden flame out on me again. Great tech. Um, I started having problems with him, and I just kind of ignored it. And one day I was in my office. He came in. He said, "I'm all done." I said, "All right, well, grab another. You got like 5 more?" "No, I'm all done. I quit." I said, "You're giving me 2 weeks?" "Nope, I'm leaving now." I said, "Okay." I said, "It really upsets me. It sucks. I just lost Steve. He died a year ago. I don't really like all this change being older. And, all you guys have been in my life, my whole life, basically, most of my life, I should say." And he said, "Okay." I said, "All right, well, thank you." And he said, "You were great," and shook his hand, and he left. And he came the next day when I was there to get the rest of his tools. And one of the guys he worked with for 18 years, he said, "Hey, are you going to clean up your mess?" And he's like, "No, you clean up my fucking mess." Jason's like, "I have nobody else. There's one other guy now. We got to find another tech. You just left." They got no huge fight. Well, I came in that day and not knowing nothing happened. Nobody said anything to me. The music was on. The guys were laughing and joking. And I thought, wow, I thought this was going to be a completely different outlook, right?
Hmm.
And all his jobs were divvied up, kind of like he was never even there, and everybody was happy. So I walked out. I go, "Man, you guys got like the radio blaring and stuff. Like, now that I think about it, the radio hasn't been on." He's like, "He didn't want it on." He said it upset him, and he couldn't do his job and think straight with the radio on. He said, so we basically all couldn't listen to music. And what I realized then at that point, me as a leader, I should have just took my lumps and said, "You know what? He's not good for culture. I need to get rid of him now," and got rid of him a couple of years ago. But I didn't, out of being human, and I thought maybe I should take care of the guy because he was there for a long time. But I failed there, and I found out what happened with him, and I was just like, wow. And I will tell you, still to this day, Chris, it bothers me that I did not take action what I should. I kind of like, I don't want to say I was kind of being a bitch. I was trying to be human, but in reality, what I should have did is put on my business hat and said, "You know what? We're not putting up with this shit. We're done."
Hmm.
And I didn't. So, shame on me, but I learned something from that. You can learn something good or bad from every situation. And unfortunately, I learned that I should have dealt with that a long time ago. And I see that happen in a lot of shops. And now what the good that came out of there, I have friends that call me and go, "Man, I got this guy that's doing 60 hours a week. He does this, but he is just giving me a hard time. He yelled at my wife and made her cry, but we can't make it without him." I'm like, "Get rid of him. Go out there and rent yourself if you have to for a while till you find somebody else. Get rid of this guy. He's a cancer." And they do, and it ends up the same way as I do. So, you can't let these guys hold you hostage because technicians are hard to find. You just can't. You have to figure it out. And as a leader, you have to say, "Well, hey, guys, you might see me out here with you for a few weeks till we find somebody else. And what you're going to gain is respect. You might have to work,
Yeah.
but I've gone out to my shop several times, and my guys will be like, 'Oh, shit, he brought his toolbox home from the house at his house. He's going to be out here in the shop.'" Because I have no problem working on this stuff, but that's not my job. I know it only could be a short-term answer.
Yeah.
Because if I'm out there working in the shop, I'm not really taking care of what I should be taking care of on the front end, and the business starts to dip. And most people, like I said, over 100,000 times now, I'm sure of it, the numbers are the most important thing for the business owner to watch. Watch the trends. You could, if you're sitting in your office and you're a good business owner, just like a good fixed ops director, you could watch the trends and say, "Okay, wait a second. Why is this guy all of a sudden doing 30 hours? He was doing 60. Come to find out he's got a personal problem. He hurt his back, something like that." That's what I consider running a business. Being a guy that owns a shop, going out and fixing cars, once again, you're going to get fixed cars.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really, really powerful example. I think that everybody should pay very close attention to the story that you just told, because this is something that I know that you've seen it in the independent world. You gave examples of it. I've seen it in the dealer world too, where there's this one high performer who is just producing. There was one advisor in a shop I worked in who was doing twice the numbers of everybody else. Now me, I'm looking at that and I'm saying, what is he doing to do twice the number of every other advisor when there's 7 of them here? And I mean, crazy money. He actually, and I won't say why, he left the dealership in handcuffs for a very heinous crime. And it turns out he was doing some like rather in my opinion, illegal things to make that kind of thing happen. People knew that, and it drained on the culture of the place. And he was getting all this praise and reward, and he got away with things because when you have that high performer, you let him show up late every day. What's it matter if he leaves an hour early? He's a high performer. What do we care? And what does everyone else see? They see somebody that's performing really well, but you kind of know why they're performing well, and they're kind of a toxic personality, not really a lot of fun to be around, and that person's constantly getting rewarded by the leadership here. How does that make me feel? How does that make the whole rest of the team feel? And the rest of them are probably looking for jobs on the side because they don't really want to work around that one person. Now, as a leader, I can understand the empathy, like at a fundamental level. I can understand the empathetic approach. I like empathy in a leader, I do. But when you take an empathetical approach to this one person who's a high performer but keeps breaking your policies and rules, by the way, standards are not what we preach, they're what we tolerate. So if I say that the standard is we're here on time every single day, but this one high performer is late every day, now the standard is you can be late if you're doing a good job. I don't think that should be the standard at all. But if I tolerate that, that's what I'm exactly communicating to my team. But maybe I have empathy and I say, well, I love this person. They've been with me for a couple of years now, and I've known him forever. I know his wife, etc. If he wants to be late a couple of times, he's a high performer. I'll let that go. And you have empathy to that one person. But what that leader does, unfortunately, is they forget about the empathy towards the rest of the team, right? Like this one person who's making everyone miserable. I keep cutting that person slack, and it's making the rest of my team miserable. So this is a very tough thing to manage as a leader, is equal empathy across the board. There's a really good book. I'm halfway through it right now. It's by Patrick Bet-David. It's called Your Next 5 Moves. I strongly recommend it because it ties into exactly what you're saying, Kevin. He teaches in that book to hire slowly and fire quickly, meaning take a
Yeah,
long
fire
time.
fast, fire
Yeah,
fast.
well, he says hire slow.
I do opposite.
I know, but so he says hire slowly. And the reason is because you want to make dang sure that this person you're hiring is a culture fit for your shop, for example. But if you find out along the way after you took all this time to hire them and you find out that they're not a culture fit and it's a problem, strike one, strike two, strike three, you're out. And it's got to be quick. You got to rip the band-aid off before the culture starts to really drain. You saw it, for example. One person, unfortunately, was draining the culture down. That person left. It was a bit of a bombastic leave. You walk in, man, was the energy higher. What people find, statistically speaking, on this is that high performer, you're worried about losing those numbers. They leave. Those numbers are gone. Everyone tends to incrementally get 10 to 20% better. So they not only make up for that one person, they exceed what that person was actually making because they all start to elevate their own productivity because that toxic team member is no longer there, draining everything down.
Totally agree with that. We were told fire
Yes,
fast
that's
from
always
like
been the
3 years
quote. Yeah.
ago.
That's always been the
Right.
quote.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. But the other thing is too, I agree with something else that we didn't even we're going to expand on. How many times have you heard from other employees when you fire a guy that's toxic and they're like, oh yeah, yeah, he was taking oil out the back door. He was doing this, he was doing that. And you're like, well, wait a second. Why didn't you tell me? Well, that was your boy. He could come in late. He could do whatever he wanted. Why am I going to put a target on my back, sitting there tattletale on him? I'm not a tattletale.
Right.
I've seen that over and over again in my organization when we were younger. When I didn't own it, I seen that happen.
I saw it
And I was
happen
like,
with
wow.
that advisor I was telling you about. Like I said, he was pulling like crazy numbers compared to everybody else, and we were working our tails off. Couldn't figure out why. I knew something was going on. Well, he ended up leaving the place in handcuffs for something outside of the automotive industry. Very heinous crime. I'll say it again. Terrible guy. Anyways, we get they disperse his tickets among everybody. So he's got like 100 repair orders. Everybody gets like 25 of them, and I start digging through and I start to realize what's going on. Well, he had exclusivity to the local police department as well as the local fire department and all these different municipalities. Every police cruiser, probably every other police cruiser that came in the door, no matter what the concern was, got a transmission replaced in it. It didn't need a transmission, but he was in cahoots with one of the technicians. They had a thing going on. They knew how to communicate with this municipality, and they would just say, hey, this one needs a transmission. Oh, another one. Those transmissions must be really bad. They're all the same model. Oh, my goodness. And then they would just pay for it. So that's bad on one hand because it's dishonest. It's not moral. It's not ethical. It's not actually legal. But it bothered me personally because that's taxpayer money right there. So now you got
Yeah, right.
taxpayer money going into your pocket is essentially what you're doing because you're replacing transmissions in vehicles that don't need transmissions. And I'm telling you, it was pages and pages of the same model of police cruisers is what they were, and they were all getting transmissions. Some of them got engines. They were all getting major repairs. I don't know why whoever was authorizing this in the police side of the world, they were like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But my goodness, was he raking
They're
in the
probably in on it
cash?
too.
Oh my God. I've seen that kind of stuff so many times. And then, as you said, the manager would be like, well, why didn't you guys tell us about that? Well, that was your boy. I didn't want to get in trouble. I didn't want any bad blood toward me. I didn't want you to treat me differently because I didn't like your buddy. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, he did a heinous crime
Yeah.
and they were still trying to defend him. Like, oh, I don't think he actually did it. And I'm like, I think he actually did. I'll tell you after this what the heinous crime was.
So one last thing before we wrap this up, here's a perfect example of culture in having the proper management and procedures in place. My guy, Nick, had a baby daughter. Congratulations to him. He's going to watch this, I'm sure. And he's my neighbor. We get a group text yesterday, hey, had the baby, I won't be in. So he has a ton of work sold. I go there this morning. I went straight there this morning because I had to come back out here for a podcast at a collision shop. I go, what's going on? They're like, Nick had his baby. You know that? I'm like, yep. I go, all his work. They're like, we're going to take care of it. Me and Jody are going to take care of it. We're going to make a fuck ton of money this week. We're going to do his work. He can stay home this week with his wife and baby, and we're going to make money. Our paychecks are going to be huge. We'll work late, but whatever. And that was like literally the whole extent of the conversation. And there's parts going on over there. My guys didn't seem to care. Can you imagine having a bunch of guys that didn't get along? Well, I ain't doing his work. I'm not doing this. I'm not I could never imagine. But I think that we could both agree, no matter where you're at, the dealer world or the independent world, in your flat rate, somebody's going to give you a bunch of brake jobs. You'll be like, yes, please.
100%. Of course. They're like 2 hours per axle. And I know guys can do it in like 15, 20 minutes.
Right. So my guys are happy. They're going to make more money. At the end of the day, the shop's going to be profitable again this week, losing a guy for the week, and we'll go on with it. But I think this is a very productive conversation because I think nobody talks about leadership a lot. And I think that plays a big part in flat rate, why flat rate is failing, as we talked about. With the right leadership, it could be structured so it could be very beneficial to everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I think people miss.
Yeah.
It's
I
just
keep
not
saying
bad.
100%. I keep saying, stop blaming flat rate. Start looking at your leadership because there's people out there that make a great living on flat rate. It's not the pay system. It's the process, the procedure, the leadership, the standards, the team, the culture, all things responsibility of your leader. Stop blaming flat rate. Take a look at your leadership.
I agree with that 10,000%. And sometimes I think these guys just get on there and they're not shop owners, they're technicians and they want to complain about this and complain about that. And flat rate's an easy target and it's easy clicks for them. Like I've told these guys on these posts before, I don't need TikTok. I could shut off the lights in the studio, never go back in there again and walk off TikTok, and I'm still going to be just as wealthy as I am right now from years of hard work and doing things the right way.
Sure.
Okay. And my people all have lived good lives, have Harleys, have new trucks, nice houses and stuff like that because I'm not greedy. Unfortunately, I seem to be the minority in a lot of these shop owners that don't take care of their people. And I think that's what needs to change in the industry. Share the wealth.
100%.
I got guys, I know a good friend of mine that two good friends of mine sold their businesses for a lot of money. And I said, you're going to hook your people up? No, I'm not hooking my people up. I paid them over the years. I'm going to go right off into the sunset. And they say, meet the new owners. And they walk away. I couldn't do that. I'm sorry. I just think that's horrible.
It wouldn't work anyways. I've seen that happen, and usually the old guard has to leave and the new guard comes in because that new owner brings their crew. They don't mesh well. You know what I mean? You got to have that good left seat, right seat handoff, and it comes down to leadership. I see that in the dealerships too. When you have a management swap out, you usually have a team swap out too. That's when everybody starts running for the hills.
Amen. Well, thanks for being on, Chris, and Repair Shop Reckoning, The Race to Zero, Chris Craig from Rocked. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you, sir. Yeah, appreciate it again. Love being here.